Lets it fly. R-I-D-I-C-U-L-O-U-S. Ridiculous.
They're going to have to trade the run for the out. The throw over to third. Ball game.
Wow. The fifth year to try and put it away with an ace. That's a storybook ending.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 31 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Last week was something of a treatise on why the NFL's dynamic kickoff isn't working, a look into the MLB divisional round and where all the series stood. I also gave a little expose on the Jets firing their head coach Robert Saleh, and who are the other head coaches in the NFL currently on the hot seat. None of the others have been fired as of today, but with mid-season coming up, it might be right around the corner for certain guys. The New York Football Jets are also at the forefront of the news cycle this week, and I think that's what I'll kick this episode off with. It's all about the NFL trades from this week. Was not expecting these. Two are pretty major, involving some star receivers, and one is more minor, but it's just as fascinating with some historical notes. Now, the most bizarre thing about the trades hitting right now is that the league trade deadline isn't until Tuesday, November 5th. I kind of prefer the MLB trade deadline, honestly, where almost every notable move hits within a day or so of that mark, but these first two trades are still pretty awesome. Let's talk about Davante Adams. He's the crown jewel, leaving the Raiders to join back up with his very longtime friend Aaron Rodgers and those New York Football Jets. These two had 8 great years together in Green Bay with the Packers during both of their primes, and Davante, in that amount of time, caught over 8,000 yards worth of footballs and 73 touchdowns. He left for the Raiders in 2022, and he had 2 more fantastic years by most people's standards, but he probably just couldn't stand that revolving door at quarterback. The Raiders still have no idea what they're doing over there, by the way, plus the lack of help other places. The Raiders are still going nowhere as usual, and the Jets just lost to the Bills on Monday Night Football to drop to 2-4. Most 2-4 teams don't end up making the playoffs at the end. Now the Jets are hoping that this 31-year-old receiver can turn around kind of their entire season and be maybe even the top target for their 40-year-old quarterback Aaron Rodgers. Garrett Wilson has been that guy. He actually leads the entire NFL in targets so far with 67, but Davante Adams is almost certainly a future Hall of Famer. And yet still, are his best days behind him? The numbers, the calendar, all of that suggests probably, yeah. Other things this trade does for both sides. The Raiders only get a 4th-round pick that can conditionally improve to a 2nd-rounder. The conditions for this to actually happen: Davante Adams has to be an all-pro, either a first-team or second-team, and or has to be on the roster for the Jets in the conference championship game. All of this to say, the Raiders are only going to get a 4th-round pick for a future Hall of Fame receiver. That return is laughable. They should consider full tank mode at this point. Start losing some games by a bunch. Get rid of anybody else with a big cap hit. Max Crosby is the guy, by the way, that the Lions really need to target. Please come to Detroit and fill in for Aiden Hutchinson at defensive end until he inevitably comes back for the wild card, ? Perhaps I am delusional on that. I will just briefly mention the Aiden Hutchinson injury, the broken tibia and fibula. Awful, gruesome, sad. Even more so, I think, because of the fact that he was probably on his way to being the Defensive Player of the Year. He had led the league in sacks, pressures, double team rate, pass rush win rate, all of the advanced stats, and just use your eyes. He was unreal. If there's a single guy who can come back and get on the field before this year is over, I do believe in Aiden, but I think best possible case would probably be he gets back for something like the divisional round of the playoffs, maybe even the conference championship, but of course, carts and horses, right? You've got to get there first. This is a long way away, but it would be one of the best comeback stories, maybe in the history of sports. Fingers crossed on that. Back to the Davante Adams trade. To slap a grade on this, although I really feel like it's just pouring salt in the Raiders' wounds, I guess I'll be nice and call it a C. That kind of assumes that the conditional pick becomes a 2nd rounder. I think if those conditions aren't met in that contract, it stays a fourth rounder. It has to be a C-. This is one of the most Raiders trades that they could have possibly made. The next trade was probably all about escaping the dreadful state of Ohio. Of course, also probably some of the worst quarterback play in the league. The Browns traded their wide receiver Amari Cooper to the Bills on Tuesday. If there was a glaring weakness on this Bills team, as they sit at 4-2, I do think receiver was it. This is a bizarre stat, but it actually tells you a lot about Josh Allen and how much he has to spread the ball around, a lot more than other guys. He has the fourth fewest completions per game to wide receivers, even though he often has to drop back and throw it 30-plus times every week. The Bills also have a lot of receiving talent in their backfield and at tight end, so that's kind of the confounding factor here, but I still think this is a perfect match. The terms of the deal, right? Amari Cooper and a 6th-round pick to Buffalo, then 3rd round and 7th round picks from next year to Cleveland. Think about that. Amari Cooper is valued more than Devontae Adams by the terms of these trades. That is nuts. Cooper himself is 30 years old, right? That just goes to show you that the free market doesn't always get it right when you let prices sort themselves out. So, is Amari Cooper still a good player too? Yes, of course. He was just stuck on an utterly pathetic Browns offense that has been beaten to death. Deshaun Watson continues to look like one of the worst quarterbacks in the game over there. Amari Cooper's career numbers: 9,736 yards, 62 touchdowns on almost 700 catches, and he's been to 5 Pro Bowls, including last year. As mentioned, he's 30 years old, typically the time that teams start kind of giving up on receivers because they just think they're all too slow. Couldn't disagree more. I think tons of receivers can produce until something like 35 if the league at large would just give him a chance. Cooper's always run some of the absolute best routes in the league, and I see constantly on tape that with veteran receivers, they can even get better with time in that area. Cooper's 6'1", about 210 pounds. He's not a giant, but he's always been awesome at attacking deep balls and winning contested catches. That's probably the number one thing that I like about his whole skill set. One thing I don't want to gloss over, and I do think it's actually a huge issue that people don't talk about too much, Amari Cooper leads the league with 29 dropped passes since the start of 22, which is a huge number. Still, I think the fit is so good with Josh Allen. I don't know that you can give this anything but an A grade. Maybe A- just for the drops, and you can say, does Josh trust him on a big 4th down heading into, the last couple of weeks of the regular season or a playoff game? I don't know, right? You never can really predict the chemistry until 2 guys get out there and they're slinging it around, but it looks fabulous on paper. Now, Cam Akers is the final trade I want to look at. He is no stranger to bouncing around the league, as most running backs in the league are kind of known to do. Akers spent his first 3 full years with the Rams, and he was very rarely the guy, the undisputed starter or anything, but he could always do some things well. He's sort of the definition of an average NFL running back, physically at least. He's about 5'10", 215 pounds. Remember, everyone in the NFL, they're athletic marvels. They're just so much better than we could dream of being. That's the reality, and I've long since faced that. Anyway, I believe Cam Akers is now the only player to ever be traded to the Vikings twice. The first time was in the middle of last year, and after that he only carried the ball 38 times in 6 games. The Vikings had even less room on their roster for Cam Akers because remember, they signed Aaron Jones away from Green Bay. Hence, Akers ended up with the Texans before this year. Surprise, surprise though, Cam Akers also couldn't get any touches there. The Texans had just brought in Joe Mixon from the Bengals. Mixon quickly set the world on fire the first couple of weeks. He was leading the league in rushing after the first 2. Then he sat out 3 games with an ankle injury. Even after that big shakeup, Cam Akers didn't really do much with the little bit of opportunity that he had. Now he's circled all the way back around to being traded back to the Vikings. My guess with this is it's as much of an insurance policy for the Vikings as anything. That aforementioned Aaron Jones has also been fantastic for them, but when the Vikings and the Jets played in London a couple weeks ago, Aaron Jones came out of that game before halftime with what was originally called a hip injury during the game, and you could tell there was no way he could run on it at the time. It was later clarified, though, on the injury report to be a hamstring injury, which sort of makes me even more worried as a guy that has him in fantasy. We still don't know if Aaron Jones is going to play this week, but he has been able to practice, albeit has been limited. If you need a running back on waivers in fantasy at the last minute, and it turns out that Aaron Jones isn't going to play, you can probably consider Cam Akers. The Vikings have been fantastic, right? They still haven't lost. Sam Darnold is known to check the ball down to running backs. There's some potential, again, only if Aaron Jones is out. I hadn't even planned to talk about fantasy football, but sometimes it's just unavoidable. It's that time of the year, right? Zooming out on all of these trades, right? At least 2 out of the 3 guys are stepping into situations where they're definitely needed. Cam Akers is the one that might not make a huge impact, but that all depends on Aaron Jones, right? If you do have the chance to pick up any of these guys in fantasy, probably a good idea. I don't know if at this point in the season you could swing a trade for Devontae Adams. I suppose it depends on what you have on your bench. So that wraps up those NFL trades. Now to check in on the MLB League Championship Series. Most everyone is convinced that it's going to come down to the Yankees and Dodgers. I include myself in that group. However, on Thursday night, the Guardians made it a little bit interesting. They pulled off some utter shenanigans to avoid going down 3-0. The Yankees have had a bunch of issues at closer this year, and Cleveland is well documented to have the best closer in the game, Emmanuel Clase. Ironically, Clase blew the save in Game 2 of the ALDS versus my gritty Tigers, getting nuked by Kerry Carpenter. He also made another game in that series really interesting, and then Cleveland still goes to him with a 3-1 lead in the 8th inning in Game 3 of the ALCS. Guess what? Clase got rocked again. He gave up homers to Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton, and by the 9th inning, the Yankees went ahead 5-3. Big 4-run swing. The Yankees got their own blown save from Luke Weaver, however, as their closer, and Cleveland walked it off in the 10th on a 2-run homer from David Fry. Without that exact, somewhat insane sequence of events, the Yankees would have gone up 3-0, and essentially that series would be over. They would actually have the chance to close it out tonight, Friday the 18th, but no such luck. On the other side, of course, it's the Dodgers and Mets in the National League Championship Series. The Dodgers have done some absolute numbers on Mets starting pitching and had one man in their lineup make some history who I was very much not expecting. I didn't know this was going on. Max Muncy can really get forgotten about because of all the other star power that the Dodgers have, right? But he just set the all-time record for consecutive playoff plate appearances reaching base with 12. Now say that 3 times fast. Another one of those rather specific stats that maybe doesn't mean that much, but it seems pretty crazy to me still. No Hank Aaron or Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, or Willie Mays ever did that in the playoffs. Besides that, did you not know that the Dodgers were the better team going into this, right? They won 98 games in the regular season to the Mets 89. And to be fair, there are other issues for both Cleveland and the Mets, but they have just been clearly out-talented too. The Dodgers nuked New York 10-2 in Game 4, and both series will play another game tonight. What a slate that's going to be, but I truly think that the Dodgers will be able to close it out tonight. I'm still going to do a World Series prediction every round and see how or if it changes, but it looks pretty easy to call right now. I fully believe in the Yankees and Dodgers. That is, I believe in them to win. I hate the style that they do it, how they go about winning, but such is life. I'll say one of these league championship series goes 6 games. If that happens, I believe in the Guardians, I think, more than the Mets. So Yankees in 6 and Dodgers in 5 in this round. Then what did I say last week about the World Series? Dodgers in 5, I believe, and I'm going to stick with it. Even though I don't believe Shohei Ohtani is going to be available to pitch, like was recently rumored, I think he, Max Muncy, Mookie Betts, Teoscar Hernandez, everybody in the Dodgers lineup has the ability to carry an offense individually. That's nuts. And they're all getting hot at the perfect time, too. They've even had Freddie Freeman, their first baseman, go in and out of the lineup throughout the playoffs a little bit, and they've been beating people up without him. A quality lineup 1 through 9 is always, in my opinion, a better construction than the Yankees' sort of great 3-4-5 but weaker everywhere else idea. One more thing I tuned in for on Wednesday night, Game 3 of the WNBA Finals. If you haven't heard, it's the New York Liberty and the Minnesota Lynx. I still think a buzzer beater is one of the best plays in sports, and there was an all-time great one in Game 3 of this series. Sabrina Ionescu canned one from 28 feet, a game-winning step back from just inside of the logo. It was perfect. If you play 2K, that was a green. You really might be able to call that the best shot in the history of the WNBA. You might remember she did a little three-point shootout with Steph Curry during the NBA's All-Star Weekend. It was incredibly close at that time, by the way, between her and the greatest shooter in history. Have I mentioned enough how the WNBA is exploding in talent to go alongside its popularity? Those finals definitely need to move to a best-of-7 series starting next year so there can be more of this kind of drama. The Liberty lead 2-1 in the series right now, and Game 4 will be tonight at 8 p.m. with the Liberty's first chance to seal it. Of course, I'm recording this on another Friday morning, so the Thursday night football game has already happened. It was the Broncos and Saints, two rookie quarterbacks that, going forward, I don't have any faith in, honestly, with Bo Nix and Spencer Rattler. Bo Nix did play well. However, the Broncos' run game ended up running away with this one, and Nix didn't have to do a ton as a thrower. Between Javonte Williams at halfback, Bo Nix at quarterback, and a couple of other guys, Denver ran for 225 yards at 6.4 yards a clip. The Saints are in huge trouble now at 2-5, losing 5 straight. Remember how I said that they always do this? The first 2 weeks they scored 91 combined points, 4th most in NFL history. Then the last 5 weeks have been bad for all sorts of different reasons. Their injuries are insane, but no one's ever going to feel bad for you in the NFL. In all likelihood, the Saints are out of the playoff hunt already, and they have to consider rebuilding a little bit, I think. I'm officially moving their head coach Dennis Allen toward the top of my hot seat rankings. If they lose next week, don't be surprised if he's out of there as the Saints head coach. The final score on this one was 33-10. One of the touchdowns for the Broncos, to be fair, was a defensive one, but the Saints have a whole bunch of issues. Whatever else catches my eye, as you know, it's always on the table. Remember, you can always feel free to hit me on my socials if you have an idea for me. Instagram and TikTok at The Voice of Tanner. Connect on LinkedIn if you're into that kind of thing. And of course, leave a like, comment, and share. This has been episode 31 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me.
Lets it fly. RIDICULOUS. Ridiculous.
They're going to have to trade the run for the out to throw over to third. Ball game.
The fifth year to try and put it away with an ace. That's a storybook ending.